Let's also look beyond the slogans and the speeches that we anticipate over the next couple of days and focus now on what the numbers tell us about the ANC's historical impact. For that, we bring in former Statistician General, Dr. Pali Lehohla, who joins us now via our video link. Dr. Pali Lehohla, thanks very much indeed for your time. Great to see you in the new year. We appreciate your patience as we canvass, I suppose, the sentiments that people have about Africa's oldest liberation on this historic day. And the ANC's key policy agenda, of course, has evolved over the years. I mean, we know a lot of it was focused on liberation. It then became about the concept of redistribution. Often we now hear about this idea of creating a developmental state. And I can imagine a scenario where the ANC will point to the houses they've built, how much tarred road there is, people having clean drinking water in their homes. But critics will be quick to point out that despite there being an increase in things like social spending, for example, South Africa still remains one of the most unequal societies in the world. All right, Dr. Pali Lehohla, I'm struggling to hear you. I suspect...
Thank you very much.
There you go. There you are. Go ahead. Thank you.
Let's congratulate ANC for being 114 years today. It's a major milestone just in terms of in temporal terms. And of course, in that temporal line, we have to look at the content. The first thing I would like to say is that where the celebrations are held in Pali, Yamatako, is a place where I used to run censuses. And in fact, I studied the place in greater detail when we ran the census of Botswana, particularly in 1991. And when I was there, the chief sent me packing with his council because there are names in Hamatlaku like Bashabairata. And they said, well, you see, these names that are given by ordinary people here, now they have become official in documents. We don't like it. So I learned a very tough lesson around how you look at development from just cultural assets like names. But coming to the ANC itself, from 1912 to today, one has to probably, given the limited time, is that, in 1994, when we got RDP, it was a very clear path to development. But it occurred at the time when the world was becoming unipolar. Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan were charting their own way into austerity, and Russia was nowhere. So when we moved into gear, while it was a very difficult moment for the government to make choices from the RDP into gear, because the agenda that was contained in RDP had to be tweaked a little bit with gear.
Sure. Sorry to interrupt you there, Dr. Pali Lehohla. As you can imagine, there's a bit of a fluid situation we're dealing with. We've just spotted one of the top 7 officials of the ANC giving what seems to be an impromptu briefing. Can I ask that we pause our discussion for a short while as we listen to Nomvula Mokonyane? We'll resume it in just a moment. Let's resume our discussion then with Pali Lehohla, the former Statistician General, who is with us still via our video link. And Dr. Lehohla, once again, let me thank you for your patience as we continue telling the story. You are still outlining to us, I suppose, what you've come to learn about development. And allow me to segue into focusing on what we've seen and the concessions that have been made in the Northwest, even by the ANC. That province, home to one of the worst performing municipalities in the country, and the degradation is visible. It's a great way for us to speak about poverty lines and the poverty head count over the years, and whether the ANC has hurt or helped the country in this regard over the years.
Well, one cannot answer a question like that in one time point. That's why I have to really go back and say, where did the change come from? And the rationale for that change in policy stance. That the ANC didn't have any alliances, either in the form of Russia or China, and therefore they had to go into gear. But I think what has been said is that post 2008, we stayed in gear. It's very interesting that the Nam Konyani is saying a number of things there. I remember that during World Cup, we said we will do things the World Cup way. The World Cup ended, and then we went back to our ways. And here I want to come back to the period 2002 to 2008, where actually we could see change in the country. Growth was hitting 6%. Gross fixed capital formation was at 25%. So we are putting 25% of the GDP back into the country. That's why we hit that growth. Unemployment was still high, but it dropped from 29% to 22%. Extension of credit was growing at 15% annually. So these things happened because there was leadership and there was decision. Many argue that China was there and the World Cup was there. China is still there. South Africa is the World Cup every year. Now, post-2008, what happened? We lost our path. We've lost our path up to today. That poverty, multidimensional poverty, while it dropped monotonically from 2001 to 2011, it turned upside down in 82 of the 252 districts. So a third of this went into poverty. And I'm sure multidimensional poverty, when we measure it with the results of the poverty statistics, will show that at the point in time of 2016, it has deepened. So we are dealing with a situation where opportunity has been spoiled. We don't have rail, we don't have schools that perform, we don't have ESCOM, we don't have those things that were actually working very well, at least between 2002 to 2008.
Yeah.
What needed to be done was to ramp up that situation. But what had happened is we have eaten the seed. So poverty is stuck at 32%. Growth is just about 1%. And now we are bringing some arguments around population growth. An unfortunate argument, although it is true, it's unfortunate that we are saying, yes, growth is below population growth. What might be an unfortunate statement that follows that will be population growth must slow down in order to accommodate mediocrity. We've accommodated mediocrity of 30% pass rate, and we'll accommodate another mediocrity of saying, let population growth be lower so that we can have a better distribution, because growth has dropped to 1%.
Gosh.
Now, only I can see people talking and talking and talking. There is no plan. The fundamentals of a plan is not this talk. The fundamentals of a plan is cultural, economic geography. Why I started with that I got a whipping in that place, Pali, where people are meeting, around place names and naming. It is an issue of cultural, economic geography, because once you don't respect the naming, then you don't respect the economics. And I'm a victim of that, and I learned the hard way.
Sure.
And I don't see these people learning that hard way.
Speaking about, I suppose, some of what is being mentioned as reasons why we're here and the heated debates we've heard over the years, often there are those who want us to believe that we have to choose between transformation and something like economic growth. And I'm sure you've heard the different permutations that are presented, this idea that one may come at the cost of the other, with, of course, BEE top of mind for many critics of the ANC. But again, what does the data suggest about whether or not that particular policy has worked in the way in which it's been envisioned?
Well, you cannot have a BEE within a neoliberal framework, because then you will buy people. What has to change fundamentally is to abandon austerity, which exists from neoliberal frameworks. Go to Mazukatu, where she talks about entrepreneurial state. The apartheid state was an entrepreneurial state. It had in itself ESCOM as an instrument of state. It had ISCO as an instrument of state. It had Transnet, or that one which was the railway, as an instrument of state. It had an infrastructure such as the CSIR, the HSRC, and then it had Denel, and all these things were instruments of state from which the private sector could be de-risked. What have we done? We have dismantled all those things, and we are taking them to the private sector, and the state is left naked. That's not a developmental state. It doesn't work that way. A developmental state is the one that actually is entrepreneurial in aggregating those commanding heights in its arm and ensuring that they use that which is heavy to shoot at which is light. But now we are putting in the private sector, and when they lose interest, the private sector lose the public interest because they are not public. Things fall apart. If you listen to Chomsky, he says you defund, people get angry, things don't work, people get angry, and then you sell these things for scrap. You see, when you see, look at ESCOM right now, it's very interesting, the development in ESCOM. It was divided into distribution, production, and something else, generation, power generation, and something else. Now there is debate as to whether this is still holding. This decision has just been made 2 years ago. But clearly, if you have to spend 400 billion rands to rail power from the Northern Cape, South Africa has the sun all over. Sun is all over in South Africa. The Northern Cape has the best. But you want to buy that sun for 400 billion to distribute it here. That doesn't make any economic sense at all. It doesn't make engineering sense. It doesn't make economic sense. It doesn't make social sense. Somebody has thrown a javelin and they want to eat. Sure. And these things have to be exposed. And they can't only be exposed when you look at the economics, the social, by using cultural economic geography. There's none of that in the ANC. Now, as I part, President Mbeki in Polokwane asked the question, how are we going to honor them, those who paid by limb and life? We are confronted by that question at this point in time. It is so stark that we do not know how to honor them.
Sobering as always. Dr. Pali Lehohla, the minutes we have together are never enough, but let me thank you nonetheless for the time and insights. Really do appreciate it. Dr. Pali Lehohla, the former Statistician General.